She introduced me to his parents the way you'd introduce a piece of furniture. "This is my stepdad," my daughter said, smiling the way she does when she's performing for an audience. "He's handy around the house. Fixed my sink last month." The man across the table, my future son-in-law's father, reached out and shook my hand. Firm grip, the kind of grip that tells you a man has spent his life measuring other people. "A handyman," he said. "Good to have one of those in the family." His wife laughed softly. My daughter laughed. My son-in-law laughed because everyone else did. I smiled and picked up my water glass. That was the moment I decided I wouldn't say a word. I should back up. "My name is Bernard Kowalski. I'm 63 years old. I live in a modest house in Kanata, on the west end of Ottawa, the kind of neighborhood where the streets are quiet on Sunday mornings and your neighbor waves from the driveway. I drive a 2019 Silverado that I haven't washed since October. I wear flannel shirts in the winter, and I own exactly one suit, which I wore that evening. My daughter, her name is Simone, is 31. I married her mother when Simone was 9. Her biological father left when she was 4, and for 5 years it was just the two of them before I came into the picture. I never tried to replace him. I just showed up, fixed things when they broke, drove her to hockey practice at 5:30 in the morning without being asked, made her lunches, helped her with her math homework even though I was lousy at fractions, sat in the bleachers at her graduation in the rain. Her mother, my wife Paulette, passed away 6 years ago, ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. After that, it was just the two of us, me and Simone, and I thought maybe that would bring us closer. For a while it did. Then she met him. His name is Trent Blackwood. He's 34, works in commercial real estate in Toronto, drives a Porsche Cayenne, and has the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having worried about money. He's not a bad person. I want to be honest about that. He treated Simone well. He was polite to me in the distant way that people are polite to someone they don't quite know how to categorize. His parents were another matter. His father, Gareth Blackwood, built a property development firm in the 90s, shopping centres, condo towers, the kind of projects that changed the skyline. His name was on buildings. His mother, Vivian, sat on the boards of 2 hospitals and a performing arts foundation. They lived in Forest Hill, in Toronto. They summered, and that's the word they actually used, summered, in Muskoka. The engagement dinner was held at a restaurant in Yorkville that I'm sure cost more per plate than I spent on groceries in a week. White tablecloths, candles, the kind of place where the waiter explains the water. Simone had been nervous about it for weeks. Nervous about me, specifically. She called me the Sunday before. "Dad," she said. She still called me Dad back then, though it would change. "Can you just, I don't know, can you let me do the talking?" "Sure," I said. "I just mean they're a certain kind of people, and I don't want anything to be awkward." I told her I understood. I did understand. I just didn't realize how far she was willing to take it. We arrived at the restaurant separately. Simone and Trent were already there with his parents when I walked in. I had taken the train down from Ottawa that morning, checked into a Holiday Inn near the Gardiner, changed into my suit in the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. I thought I looked fine. I thought I looked like a man. Gareth stood when I approached the table. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who looks like he was born in a boardroom. "Bernard," Simone said, putting a slight emphasis on the name, the way you do when you want someone to understand their place in the hierarchy. "This is Gareth and Vivienne." Transparence. "Bernard," Gareth said, shaking my hand. "Great to meet you. What is it you do?" And there it was. First question. Every room, every dinner, every handshake in this country. What do you do? That's how they measure you. Before I could answer, Simone laughed. "He's handy," she said. "A handyman. Fix my sink, my garage door, the deck out back. If something's broken, he's the guy." She smiled at me, and there was something in the smile I hadn't seen before, an apology wrapped in a dismissal. Gareth nodded the way people nod when they filed you away and moved on. "Useful," Vivian said. She said it kindly, I'll give her that, but it was the kind of kindness you extend to someone you don't expect to see again after the night is over. I sat down. I picked up the menu. I did not correct Simone. Dinner moved the way those things do. Bread was brought. Wine was poured. They ordered a bottle I'd never heard of, that I later looked up and which cost $340. There was talk of Trent's latest project, a mixed-use development in Etobicoke. There was talk of where the wedding might be held. Simone mentioned she'd always wanted something in the Muskokers, which she'd never mentioned to me before in her life, but which she mentioned now because she'd understood the room. "And you're based in Ottawa, Bernard?" Gareth asked sometime around the main course. "Kanata, yeah. Retired." "Simmy," I said. Simone jumped in. "He does odd jobs, mostly. Keeps busy." She turned back to Vivienne. "He's been doing that kind of thing his whole career." I took a sip of water. The thing is, and I want to be fair to Simone here, because I've thought about this a great deal in the years since, I don't think she was malicious. I think she was scared. She'd spent her whole adult life building towards something that looked like this table, this restaurant, this family. She'd worked hard. She'd made something of herself. And I was the piece of her history that didn't quite fit the frame she was building. The flannel shirt, the Silverado, the man who fixed her sink. I understood it. That didn't make it hurt less. "So what's the biggest job you've ever taken on?" Trent asked me, with the good-natured curiosity of someone who genuinely can't imagine my life being interesting. I looked at him. "Probably the Rado project," I said, "in the 90s, but that was a while ago." "Rideau?" Gareth said. "What kind of project?" "Infrastructure," I said, "bit of everything." He nodded, the same filing away nod. I watched Vivienne across the table. She was looking at me differently. Had been looking at me differently for the last 15 minutes, in fact, not rudely, just carefully. The way you look at someone when something is trying to connect in your memory and you can't quite make it reach. I looked away. The dessert menus came. Trent ordered something with a French name. Gareth ordered scotch. Vivienne had barely touched her entree. She was still watching me. I've lived long enough to know when something is about to happen. Paulette used to say I had an instinct for the room. She was right. I could feel it the way you feel a shift in the weather before the sky changes colour. "Bernard," Vivienne said. Her voice was different now, measured. Everyone looked at her. "I'm sorry, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but did you work for Northmark?" The table went still. Northmark. The company I'd co-founded in 1988 with two partners in a rented office on Bank Street in Ottawa. We'd started doing civil engineering consulting, drainage systems, road infrastructure, municipal contracts. By 1998, we had 400 employees and contracts in 6 provinces. In 2004, I sold my stake to an American infrastructure fund for a number that I've never told anyone outside of my accountant and my lawyer. I walked away. I bought the house in Kanata. I drove a truck. I fixed things when they broke. I didn't say any of that. I just nodded. "You're—" Vivienne set down her glass. "You're Bernard Kowalski. The Bernard Kowalski." Gareth turned to look at me, really look at me, for the first time all night. "Northmark Infrastructure?" he said. "I was one of the founders, yeah," I said. "Long time ago." Silence. Not the polite silence of a dinner party, the other kind, the kind where everyone at the table is recalibrating simultaneously. "We bid against Northmark on a project in 2001, Gareth said slowly. "The Pearson Terminal expansion, we didn't get it." He paused. "Your firm had the better proposal." "I remember that one," I said. Simone was looking at me. I didn't look at her. "I knew your name," Vivienne said. She was shaking her head slightly. "I sat on the infrastructure committee for the hospital foundation. We reviewed several contractors. Northmark came up. Your name came up. I didn't." She stopped, started again. "Simone said you were." The sentence hung there. "Handy," I said. The table was very quiet. "Dad," Simone said. Her voice was different. I'd heard that voice twice before, Once when she was 16 and broke Paulette's favourite lamp and confessed before we even asked. Once at the hospital when they told us it was stage 3. Dad, she said again. I looked at her. I kept my face even. Not cold. I wasn't trying to punish her in front of these people. But I also wasn't going to rescue her from the moment. I think I'd like some of that scotch, actually, I said to the waiter. Gareth ordered it for me. Good stuff. A single malt from Cape Breton he'd discovered on a trip to Nova Scotia. We talked about it for a while, the two of us, the way men do when they need a moment to let the air settle. He was different now. I can't say warmer exactly. Men like Gareth don't get warm quickly, but level. He spoke to me like a person. Asked about the early days of Northmark, how we'd structured the equity, what had led me to sell. I answered honestly. I didn't embellish and I didn't minimize. Vivienne had moved her chair slightly closer to Simone. I couldn't hear what they were saying. Simone's face had gone very still in the way it does when she's trying not to cry. Trent looked like a man who had learned something significant about his fiancée and was still working out how he felt about it. Why didn't you say anything? Gareth asked me, somewhere around 10 o'clock. We were the last two still working on our drinks. I thought about how to answer that. Because she asked me not to, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. She didn't know, I said, about Northmark, about any of it. That was my choice. I kept things private. After Paulette died, I didn't see the point of. I stopped. I'm not saying it was the right call, but she didn't do it out of nothing. She did it out of embarrassment she didn't fully understand she had. Gareth nodded slowly. You could have corrected her, he said, not accusing, just observing. I could have, I said, but then what? She spends the rest of the dinner mortified, and I spend it feeling like I proved something. That's not the kind of night I wanted. He picked up his glass. What kind of night did you want? I don't know, I said honestly. Just a quiet dinner, to meet the people my daughter's going to spend her life with. I glanced across the table. That part turned out all right, I think. He almost smiled. Simone called me the next morning, early, before 8. I was having coffee at the hotel window, watching the traffic move on the Gardner below. Dad. Hey. I don't know where to start, she said. You don't have to start anywhere, I told her. No, she said. I do. There was a pause. I heard her breathing steady. When I introduced you when I said you were a handyman, I wasn't trying to. Another pause. I don't know what I was doing. I know. I was embarrassed, she said. Not of you, of me, of the gap between, how they grew up and how I grew up, and the fact that I still sometimes feel like I'm standing at the edge of a room I don't belong in. Her voice cracked. And I took that out on you, in front of people, and that was... She stopped. That was wrong, Dad. That was really wrong. I'm sorry. I sat with that for a moment. Outside, the city was already moving. A streetcar crawled along the street below. Somewhere a delivery truck idled at a light. Simone, I said, you want to know something I've never told you? She was quiet. When I first started Northmark, we're talking 1988, I had $17,000 and a used drafting table. I called your grandfather to tell him. My father. Do you know what he said? No. He said, Bernie, you know what an engineer is, a plumber who passed his exams. I laughed. Hung up. That was the whole call. She laughed too, small, surprised. I never built that company to prove anything to him, I said. I built it because I was good at it and I liked the work. And when I sold it, I walked away because I'd already gotten everything I wanted from it. I paused. You know what the best day of my career was? What? The morning you got your acceptance letter to Carlton. You called me and you were crying and I was sitting in my truck in a parking lot on a Tuesday morning because I'd just come from a site visit and I sat there for 20 minutes after you hung up because I didn't want to go anywhere. I just wanted to sit with it. I set down my coffee. That's the best day. She didn't say anything for a while. I love you, Dad, she said finally. I know, I said. I love you too. The wedding was the following September, a lodge in Haliburton, not Muskoka, but close enough, and the view of the lake was better anyway. Gareth and I sat together at the rehearsal dinner, and he told me about a project his firm was looking at in Northern Ontario, and I told him what I knew about the regulatory framework, and we talked for 3 hours straight. Vivienne asked me to dance at the reception. I said yes. She was a better dancer than I expected. Partway through, she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." "You don't," I said. "I do," she said. "For how we received you that first night, we made assumptions." "We all did," I said. She looked at me. "You're very gracious about it." "I'm 63, I said. "I ran out of energy for grudges about 15 years ago." She laughed, and it was a real laugh, and I decided I liked her. Simone found me near the end of the night, standing on the deck outside, looking out over the water. The October air had a bite to it. The lake was perfectly still. She came and stood beside me. "You okay?" she asked. "More than okay," I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder. She hadn't done that since she was maybe 14, the day we buried her mother's sister and came home and sat on the porch in silence for an hour. "Trent's family really likes you," she said. "Good people," I said. "I talked to his dad tonight for like an hour about I don't even know what." "Infrastructure," I said. "Of course," she said. We stood there for a while. The tree line was dark against a blue-black sky. Somewhere over the water, a loon called, that long, lonely sound that sounds like it's coming from somewhere very far away and very long ago. "I fixed your sink," I said. She laughed, startled, then really laughing, the kind of laugh that's also a little bit of relief. "You did," she said. "You really did." "And the garage door." "And the garage door." "And the deck." "Dad." "I'm just saying," I said. "Handy." She was still laughing. I put my arm around her. The lake was still. The night was cold. My daughter was married and happy and standing next to me, and somewhere inside a woman I'd come to like was probably telling someone the story of the quiet man at the first dinner who turned out to be someone no one expected. I didn't need them to know. I never needed any of them to know. I just needed the night to end the way it did, with her beside me, the water out there, and something that felt very much like things being right. I've thought about that dinner a lot in the years since. Not with bitterness, that's not what I mean. More the way you think about a moment that taught you something you didn't know you needed to learn. What struck me most wasn't the silence at the table when Vivian said my name. It was what came before it, the way I just sat there, the way I picked up my water glass and said nothing. I used to wonder if that was weakness. Now I think it was the truest thing I did all night. There's a kind of quiet strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't correct people in the moment or keep score of every slight. It just holds its ground and waits, not because it's passive, but because it knows that the truth tends to surface on its own if you give it room. I learned that not in any boardroom or engineering office. I learned it watching my father, who was a stubborn, difficult man and who taught me by negative example that the loudest person in the room is usually the most frightened one. Simone was frightened that night. I see that clearly now. She'd spent years building a version of herself that she hoped would be enough, and somewhere in the back of her mind she'd decided that I, the flannel shirts, the truck, the man who fixed her deck, didn't fit that version. That wasn't cruelty. That was a young woman who had grown up in the gap between where she came from and where she wanted to go, and hadn't yet figured out that you don't have to choose between them. The hardest thing about watching someone you love make a mistake is understanding that you can't fix it for them. You can only stay present. You can only be the kind of person who's still standing there, without resentment, when they find their way back. That's not easy. It took me years of living, losing Paulette, building something from nothing, walking away from it, to understand that the people who matter most to you are going to disappoint you sometimes, and that your capacity to hold that disappointment without letting it harden into something permanent is one of the most important things you'll ever develop. I think about what it takes to build a life you can actually stand behind. Not a life that looks a certain way from the outside, but one with a foundation under it. That requires knowing yourself well enough to act with integrity even when no one's watching, even when correcting the record would be easy and forgivable. It requires the kind of clear-eyed judgment that comes from paying attention to people and situations without the distortion of ego. And it requires the willingness to keep going through the difficult stretches, through grief, through silence, through rooms where you feel invisible, without letting those stretches define you. Bernard didn't become who he was because things went smoothly. He became who he was because they didn't, and he kept showing up anyway. That's the part I want to remember, not the silence at the table, not Garrett's expression when he placed the name, just Simone, at the end of the night, leaning her head on my shoulder by the water, both of us watching the lake go dark. That's the whole thing, right there.